Hi there, this is Melissa Schnyder, and I am a professor in the School of Security and Global Studies. And today I'm going to be presenting on my faculty research grant from 2023. And this presentation is all about that grant and that research. So it's going to be focused on examining how norms are used in advocacy to establish ecocide as an international crime. First, I'll start out with some background and context. Since 2017, an international coalition has been advocating to amend the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court to include ecocide along with the other existing international crimes, including war crimes, genocide, and crimes against humanity. In June of 2021, an international panel of legal experts came together and drafted a formal definition of ecocide. This was the first time we see a formal definition agreed upon by an international panel. And they state that for the purposes of this statute, ecocide means unlawful or wanton acts committed with knowledge that there is a substantial likelihood of severe and either widespread or long-term damage to the environment being caused by those acts. So they have been really campaigning to get the Rome Statute of the ICC amended to try to include ecocide as a formal international crime. And this definition that these experts came together to draft in 2021 was part of those efforts to establish a definition, lay the groundwork for a definition of what we're talking about when we talk about this notion of ecocide. So the goal here that they provided some rationale right behind this definition, and their goal expressed behind this rationale. When the panel was asked about it, they stated that it is our hope that ecocide will become a watershed fifth international crime in the Rome Statute of the ICC, sitting alongside genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and aggression. Those are the existing international crimes. Beyond that, however, they said our broader goal is to see global shifts in attitudes towards the environment. And so this was really the launching point for my research project, because this reference to global shifts in attitudes suggests a key role for international norm change and norm-based strategies to be used in advocacy to bring about the desired change. There is a growing body of research that examines the role of social norms, not only in advocacy, but in other areas as well. And just one definition of norms that I'm pulling from the literature here is they tend to be thought of as collective expectations for the proper behavior of actors with a given identity. They shape a broad range of human behaviors and practices. And norms have also been shown to shape many things at the international level, and especially when it comes to difficult problems such as large-scale environmental destruction, climate change, human rights, etc. Norms play a role. They can either impede efforts for policy action and reform, or they can facilitate those efforts by, for example, promoting solidarity and cooperation and coordination. In addition to that, norms are important because at the international level and national level, they undergird institutions, or the rules and procedures that are both formal and informal that structure social interaction by constraining and enabling actors' behavior. So they're important in many of these respects. Research on intentional norm change through advocacy has identified two key strategies that activists have used in the past to produce institutional reform. The first is normative reframing, and this refers to the reframing of an issue by applying an alternative pre-existing norm to that issue. And the second strategy, and the one that I'm focused on in this research, is called normative innovation. And the literature defines this as the deliberate creation of entirely new norms in an issue space. So when we apply these strategies to intractable problems, deliberate norm change through collective action can create openings for institutional change, including the creation of new policies or new institutional structures. And when advocates adopt one of these norm-based strategies, their goal is typically norm-driven institutional change. As norm-based advocacy strategies, normative reframing and normative innovation have been studied in the context of other issues and other movements for large-scale global change, including violence against women, forced displacement, refugee protection, etc. Yet, there's still relatively little research examining how advocates and activists deliberately use norms in advocacy addressing widespread, severe, and or long-term environmental destruction. And so that was the gap that this research is attempting to help fill. With all of that being said, my research question was, how are norms used in international advocacy efforts that push to establish ecocide as an international crime via an amendment to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court? This research focuses mainly on normative innovation, on that strategy, examining how these advocate networks attempt to create and diffuse new norms related to ecocide. The processes examined here represent important but under-researched mechanisms for understanding international level institutional change when it comes to how international institutions address these large-scale environmental problems. And examining strategies like these can help solidify our understanding of how norms are playing a role in efforts to bring about significant international level change on issues related to environmental conservation and sustainability. So with that, I'll get into the methodology and the fieldwork. So I conducted semi-structured interviews as the first part of the methodology. My target was civil society organizations, or CSOs, that were active and that are active in the movement to criminalize ecocide within the context of the European Union and via the international level through the International Criminal Court. So my recruitment was aimed at the major actors in Brussels and internationally, and those CSOs include End Ecocide Belgium, End Ecocide on Earth, and Stop Ecocide International, which is the largest international player in this issue space. The fieldwork that I conducted took place in Brussels, Belgium, in July 2023 to conduct stakeholder interviews there. And I combined that with document analysis as a secondary method. And with that, I was able to do document analysis at the Promise Institute on Human Rights at UCLA to review documents related to the working group on the use of international criminal law to protect the environment. And that fieldwork took place in Los Angeles in October 2023 to analyze documents and hold informal conversations with key stakeholders at the Promise Institute. In terms of the findings, I'm proposing what I call here a three-part mechanism that explains how the strategy of normative innovation is used by these activists in the context of trying to push for a ban on ecocide at the international level. And the first part of that three-part mechanism is calling attention to harmful status quo norms to attempt to weaken their influence. Okay, so that is step one in this process. So in the case examined here, there are two sets of harmful status quo norms that advocates tend to call attention to in relation to ecocide. The first set involves norms that undergird corporate immunity, or more generally, the lack of responsibility and accountability for corporations when it comes to the environment, which can result in mass destruction of the environment. And so this discourse highlights the failure of accountability, the failure of responsibility that's evident in, and this is evident throughout the movement's advocacy, both in the interviews and in the document analysis. In fact, one advocate is quoted as explaining that, quote, right now in most of the world, no one is held responsible Another advocate says that by acting together now to hold those responsible for unlawful or wanton destructive practices to account, we can create better and fairer ways of doing business that are firmly supported by international legal frameworks. And so in this discourse, responsibility and accountability are connected to norms that support corporate immunity, highlighting these status quo standards that advocates point to as being harmful practices and that allow for harmful practices to occur. So humans' relationship with nature, or this perception of nature as a bank of resources, is a second and equally significant foregrounded norm that I found within advocates' discourse. Within this realm, a failure of protection is often discussed, highlighting norms that really undergird this perception of nature as a bank of resources. As some activists say, it is essential to address the mechanisms that encourage an extractive use of resources and a destructive relationship with nature. So that's one quote that I was able to pull to highlight this normative, this highlighting of this normative perspective. The normative perception that environmental crimes are not taken seriously compared to other types of criminal offenses, and as a result are often ignored by mainstream criminal justice systems, is a related norm within this category as well. And so this failure to protect the environment is in part due to a normative perception that environmental crimes are just not taken seriously compared to other criminal offenses. And the resulting ignoring of these types of large-scale crime, or these types of crimes that lead to large-scale mass destruction of the environment. And so these were the set of norms here that I found made up sort of the first part of this mechanism, which was calling attention to the harmful status quo in an attempt to draw attention to it and to weaken it. Okay, the second part of the mechanism here is proposing a new normative framework. And so after advocates call attention to these harmful norms that they perceive to undergird the status quo, they then attempt to create an alternative norm to take the place of those norms, based upon the belief, and their alternative norm that they propose to create is this new norm that's based on the belief that all things are bound together, all things connect. And the new norm is also based upon the premise of a right to a livable environment. And so combining these two things aims to create a new moral standard of behavior, or this new norm, in other words, that's based on a deep respect for nature and a deep reverence for its protection, similar to the norm of respect for human life and the norm sanctioning against murder. So the proposed normative framework explicitly likens intense harm to the environment to intense harm to human beings, which I thought was an interesting parallel, an interesting moral parallel that these advocates tend to draw. So to see that come out in the research, one advocate explained, the fact that there is not a crime that says you shouldn't destroy the environment to this degree means that there is implicit permission around it. I mean, you can imagine what will happen if we suddenly decriminalize murder. And so you can start to see here the moral parallel that I've described above when it comes to establishing the new normative framework and the parallel to human life that they're drawing. And then the final part of this three-part mechanism is norm diffusion. Okay, and this is when the new normative framework that I talked about on the previous slide begins to spread and take hold. And we know when the new norm diffuses and begins to take hold because, as one advocate quoted, that I'm quoting here says, harming nature will begin to feel the same as harming human beings. This will help us to grasp the fact of our connection with the natural living world. In addition, diffusion of this new normative framework will be marked by a change in how individuals view existing policies and practices. when they begin to weigh them within the context of this new normative standard. And that's another sign that the new normative framework is diffusing or spreading. As one activist said, we will begin to recontextualize economic policy, investment, and innovation in light of what our ecosystems can readily support. So that sort of highlights the sort of a signal of how we will see this new norm diffuse. In this way, the new normative framework is explicitly positioned against the tolerance of widespread destruction of the environment and has telltale signs of diffusion. It entails assigning responsibility, moral judgment, establishing accountability via the threat of criminalization, and changing the rules. And so criminalizing ecocide through the International Criminal Court is seen as a vital step in reinforcing new norms in relation to large-scale environmental destruction, and is itself closely tied to the process of new norm creation because, as an activist mentioned, when the crime exists, it gives it immediate moral power in people's minds. And so from the advocate's point of view, the actual criminalization, the formal criminalization and the formal institutional change that's needed to accomplish that is a necessary step in diffusing the new normative framework. So this moral power is based on that alternative normative framework that advocates have developed and can potentially function as a powerful force for prevention in which new normative standards deter and prevent the worst crimes. So that is the advocate's goal. And lastly, as several advocates have stated, the aim of criminal liability is prevention as opposed to punishment. And so what they're seeking is this new framework to the creation of new norms to help prevent widespread destruction of the environment through institutional change at the international level, as opposed to actually seeking punishment. So to wrap this up, the conclusion and next steps. Although normative innovation cannot be expected to be a successful advocacy strategy or tactic in every situation, it can nonetheless offer a unique prospect for challenging status quo institutions that may be highly resistant to change at the international level, like the ICC and the Rome Statute. A more developed understanding of how advocates are currently using norm-based strategies, such as normative innovation, can help to develop and improve upon our theories of institutional change as well, and can offer additional evidence and additional cases of how a focus on norms can increase our understanding of the different range of solutions to current environmental challenges. And so what I'm currently doing now is just in the late stages here of finishing the research paper, which is going to be submitted for publication to an academic journal called Geoforum. And so that is where I'm planning to publish this research. It's going to be submitted this year in 2024, and hopefully will be accepted and published next year in 2025. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it, and have a great rest of the day. Thank you.